Will the New York Mets sign Edwin Diaz as setup man this offseason? We'll discuss on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So, the relief market is starting to move. One of the few places in free agency where we're seeing some signings. Robert Stevenson signed recently. Aroldis Chapman signed today. And guess what? The Mets were linked to both of those guys, I'm pretty sure the same day that they signed with other teams. And that's sort of been a repeating pattern now this offseason. The Mets show interest, a guy signs. The Mets show interest in Brent Suter. He signs with the Reds. The Mets show interest in John Brebbia. He signs with the White Sox. And then, of course, these two guys. What we're really going to focus on today is how do you get a setup man into that bullpen? And it's a complicated dilemma for David Stearns to try to solve because they've been signing a lot of guys. They've been signing a ton of minor league contracts, and they signed Jorge Lopez as a bounce back candidate, and they've been signing split deals. And they're trying to find a lot of talent, and that competition in spring training for spots in that bullpen, it's going to be fierce, or there's at least going to be a lot of contenders. But if you're looking for that traditional setup man, these options are dwindling, and Stevenson and Chapman were two of them. Stevenson was amazing with the Rays down the stretch. That's why he gets a really big deal with the Angels. He had a 2.35 ERA, a 0.68 whip. The guy was just awesome. With that said, would I have been happy if the Mets signed him to a 3-year, $33 million deal? I would have been happy that he was in the Mets bullpen. But a 3-year contract for a reliever scares me unless you're getting a closer like Edwin Diaz on a 5-year deal where I'm pretty much cool with the dollar amount in the years. Same thing goes with what the Astros just did with Josh Hader. You're getting one of the best relief pitchers in baseball, someone that will absolutely change the math on how your bullpen is constructed for years to come. Those guys you pay. But the Robert Stevensons of the world who were, found money for the Rays last year and then get paid, there's risk. Just last season, he didn't pitch well with the Pirates. The year before, he didn't pitch well with the Rockies, ended up on the Pirates and pitched well in a smaller sample. It was a good enough sample with the Rays that guys got really good stuff. I get it. But 3 years is a risk. So while I'm not necessarily upset about that deal, it is taking another option off the board. Chapman, the same thing. I don't know if I could applaud an Aroldis Chapman signing because the guy's one of the most polarizing players in baseball. And I don't know if you want him in your clubhouse, and I certainly don't trust him pitching in big moments in October. As a regular season setup man, he would have been great. Okay, he would have filled that need to have a complement to Edwin Diaz. He could have saved games when Edwin needed to come in and pitch in the 8th inning or the 7th inning in a bigger spot, and you'd have another option. But he gets $10.5 million from the Pittsburgh Pirates, a team that he's probably not going to spend the whole season on unless they have a great year. Dude probably gets flipped at some point to another team. Maybe he is on the Mets in August. But the point is, it was another setup man that left the market, and those options are getting pretty few and far between. I've been banging the drum for David Robertson all offseason just because I wanted to see him and Edwin Diaz in the same bullpen, and we got robbed of that last year. But I don't know if he'd want to come back to the Mets after they traded him, and especially if they're not going to be a top-tier contender. He probably has better options. He might retire. Colin McHugh just retired. Once these guys get a little bit further down the line, and Robertson certainly is there, there's some questions if you actually want to go back and do the grind again, or if you want to stay back and be with your family. So who knows? The guy that's out there that the Mets have reportedly shown interest in, according to Andy Martino, who would fit that billing of a setup man, is Hector Neris. Now, in that same report, Martino linked the Mets to Chapman. Obviously, that's not happening. And also Wandy Peralta and Adam Ottavino. We'll talk about those two in the next segment a little bit more. But Neris is sort of the guy that's left that makes the most sense if you want a traditional eighth inning reliever. That setup man. He was amazing with the Astros last year. He hit a 1.71 ERA, a career year. But you look at some of the expected metrics that doesn't tell us what he probably should have pitched to. His expected ERA was 3.35. His expected fielding independent pitching was 4.45. It doesn't mean he's bad, but what those stats are telling you is that he had a little bit of good fortune, and part of that is looking at his walks. His walk rate was over 4 per 9. So if you're walking 4 batters per 9, you're walking a guy maybe 1 out of every 2 relief appearances, and that could come back to haunt you. And if I do remember correctly, it did in the playoffs for Neris. Now he also has had some big moments for the Astros in the playoffs as well. He would be a very good signing for the Mets. I would love it if they actually did it, but I'm going to question if the Mets are going to be in the market for a guy that should get paid top dollar relatively. I mean, if Robert Stevenson gets $11 million per, why isn't Neris getting that? Now, Martino says in his report that Neris is asking for $7 to $11 million on a 1 or 2 year deal. That seems remarkably low to me. Like 11 million, yes, I just said that would be probably fitting for him. But I wouldn't be shocked if some team gave him a 3rd year. And $7 million, that's just not going to happen. In that same report from Martino, he also reiterated his previous report about them having only $10 million left to spend. Would you want them to spend that all on one reliever or break that up and try to sign 2? There's a lot of different ways the Mets can attack this offseason, or not this offseason. At this point, it feels like this offseason is dragged on forever to attack these last 3-4 weeks here before spring training really picks up and they got to start just looking at the talent in-house. Hector Neris would be a great signing to solidify the back end of that bullpen. I just don't know if it's, a David Stearns move to sign a setup man to top dollar for multiple years. Now, maybe the way around that is you sign him to a 1-year deal. And that's sort of what I've talked about for David Robertson for a while. Don't have that extra money into your books, on the 2025 payroll. Keep things clean to do other moves when you might need to. But this year, your payroll is shot because of all the dead money on the books anyway. So why not overpay a reliever $14-15 million and just get a good one on a 1-year deal? Well, to me, it makes a lot of sense. But if you go back and you believe the $10 million budget thing, you can't do that. And if they do have a $10 million budget, if that is true, it would make a little bit of sense why they would have shown interest on Stevenson and Chapman, 2 guys that would fit that role who got paid more than $10 million. Is that a hard line in the sand from Steve Cohen, which doesn't feel very Steve Cohen, but we don't know? Because if it is, and they're on the phone with Chapman, and they have $10 million waiting for him, and the Pirates say, we're going to give you 10.5, and he just chooses the $500K and goes over there, is that really what happened there? It might be. I don't know. Personally, I believe the Mets are really interested in a player. They wouldn't care about $1 million or $2 million more to get that player, but we haven't seen them do that this offseason. So it has me pretty skeptical that they're actually going to be the team that lands Hector Neris when it's all said and done. Which leads you to the other lesser options on the market who don't necessarily profile as an elite setup man for Edwin Diaz. And it's ignoring Robertson for now. I think he still sort of fits that bill, but he's also older. So, Peralta and Ottavino, those are 2 of the options. We'll go over them a little bit in the next segment. But I'm going to go down the line of some others that I think are interesting fits to solidify that bullpen a bit. And we'll see if any of them end up coming to fruition in the coming weeks here. Before we get to any of it, though, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience are what brings home that winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is here to provide you with everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Whether that's superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. If you need speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you're always going to find what you need for your car or truck, and at exactly the price you're looking for. Also, with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part's guaranteed to fit your ride. So every time that part is going to fit, or you're going to get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Could the New York Mets reunite with Adam Ottavino? He's already on SNY, so obviously a New York guy. Keep him in New York. Why not? I wonder if he regrets declining that $6.75 million player option. I don't know if he's going to top that in free agency. I know he had some problems with there being deferred money in that deal. That was part of what led to him deciding to, go in another direction. He approached the Mets about changing that contract so the money wasn't deferred. And then just from their talks in general between the two sides, decided to hit the open waters. We'll see. We'll see if he comes back. I don't think it's the worst outcome for the Mets. Even last year, when it was a down season, he had a 3.21 ERA. It felt so much worse than that. And I think his record really indicates it. Not that we care too much about records anymore, particularly for relief pitchers. But when you go 1-7, it does tell a story. Adam Ottavino lost the Mets 7 games. And you look back on their season, they were, a 75-win team. You add 7 wins to the equation, and things are a little bit different. And not to say the season's his fault, but he certainly was one of the contributing members to why the Mets did not meet expectations. He was not the guy that he was the year prior. We had a 2.06 ERA. And that year, again, records don't matter, but he was 6-3 on the 101-win Mets. So it just shows you that he wasn't the same guy. The walks were worse. He got hit harder. The home runs were about the same, but it felt like he gave up the home runs at the worst time. I wouldn't mind him back, though. I feel like he's a good pitcher still. He still has good stuff. There's no doubting that. And, it would be a experienced arm you can slide into your bullpen, but not one that's probably going to excite Mets fans at this juncture. Wandy Peralta, you're taking another former Yankee. I don't know how much Mets fans love the fact that they keep shopping in former Yankee waters. Does that have anything to do with Carlos Mendoza being the manager? I don't know. But he's a good left-handed pitcher. Okay, so if you got Wandy Peralta, you feel pretty good about him being able to give you some quality innings. And to have him and Brooks Raley, at least it satisfies that. I think the question is, what do the Mets need? And another lefty is definitely something that they could tackle right now in a way to make their bullpen a little more complete. But getting that setup, man, is harder than getting another lefty. Peralta's a nice fit. You can go out and get Matt Moore, which sort of satisfies both. I guess Peralta, in some respects, does as a guy that can pitch and leverage. I just don't look at him as an 8th inning guy per se, just like I don't look at Brooks Raley as an 8th inning guy. Is Matt Moore an 8th inning guy? I don't know, but he has pitched really well the last couple of years. Had a 1.95 ERA in 2022, a 2.56 ERA last year. It's an option. A guy that I really like is Ryan Brazier. He struggled in Boston. Okay, in 2022, he had a 5.78 ERA. 2023 had a 7.29 ERA, and then was released. Signs with the Dodgers on a minor league deal, makes 2 appearances in AAA. They bring him out to the big leagues, all fixed, and he goes on to pitch to a 0.70 ERA in 39 appearances. How much of that is real? How much of that is Dodgers magic? I don't know. I think what you run into with the relief market and why the Mets probably haven't jumped out in front of it much, and why I think a lot of teams are hesitant to, is it's better to find the Ryan Brazier or the Robert Stevenson before they get paid than after. And maybe the Mets have done that. already this offseason. Maybe they do that in May, where some team discards a guy, the Mets pick him up and they fix him, and he ends up being great. That's sort of what we're seeing happening more and more in the big leagues. And I don't know if this is something that's always happened and I just wasn't as aware to it than I am now, covering the sport as extensively as I do, not only with, Locked On Mets, but with just baseball. But that, and I think it's partly due to the whole, drive lineization of pitching. The cameras that they use, the way that they map your arsenal and can figure out, oh, if you just tweak your arm slot a little bit, you'll get this result, and how they can do all the pitch mapping. It feels like guys, especially relievers, can sort of spawn overnight a lot quicker, and it in some respects makes this a position that you don't have to be as stressed about adding to. And maybe that's the Mets' whole philosophy here. And if they don't add anyone, it does not mean their bullpen's going to just suck. It could mean that, but you also could be shocked that, Kyle Crick has a 1.7 ERA over 50 appearances with the Mets this year. And right now you're like, who is Kyle Crick again? Maybe he's awesome. There's so many guys you can go up and down the Mets roster that they've added on minor league deals that could do that. I'd feel a lot better if they got some veterans in this bullpen. That's why I like some of the names we've mentioned today. There's also Jesse Chavez, who somehow is just unbelievable for the Braves every single year. He's got a cutter that he just continuously throws, and he gets outs. And he had a 1.56 ERA last season. But the dude is 40. Matt Moore is 34. Ryan Brazier is 36. Doesn't mean these guys can't continue to succeed, but it also means they could fall off a cliff at any time. So, just because they go out and sign Jesse Chavez to a $4 million deal doesn't mean he's holding down the eighth inning and pitching to a sub-2 ERA again. There's every chance that last season was his last good one, and he's pitching to a 5.7 ERA, and he's off the Mets by June. It's just such a volatile market. A couple other names before I move on to a different version of this conversation, which is, if the Mets have a certain amount of money left to spend, should they use it on a top arm or a top bat? We'll kind of go through that in the final segment. There's a few more that are out there that I think are worth noting. Ryan Stanek has had a lot of success with Houston. Last year wasn't a bad year. It was maybe bad for him, a 4.09 ERA, but he's a guy that's been a pretty consistent relief pitcher. 1.15 ERA in 2022. He was elite. 2021, a 3.42 ERA. I think he's probably good to give you a mid-threes ERA, and he's pitched in leverage before. I love that signing. Michael Fulmer's out there, former Mets prospect, traded for Yoenis Cespedes all those years ago. He's got good stuff. Don't love him as your high leverage pitcher, but an MLB veteran who's going to give you some innings. Fine addition. Carl Edwards Jr., guy that we've seen a long time with the Nationals, previously with the Cubs, right there with Michael Fulmer. Got good stuff, a lot of MLB experience, can give you innings in a bullpen, right? Lou Trevino and Kenyon Middleton, more Yankees retreads. There's options. There's options on the market. And out of all those relievers I named, the Mets are going to sign two that I didn't name. And that's just how these things work. And when they do, I'll break it all down. But when you see the market and you understand what's out there and you think about trying to fortify this bullpen, it does leave me to wonder if that is the best way to spend whatever budget you have left. So what we're going to talk about next is if they should go out and sign, let's say, Hector Neris, or if they should sign Jorge Soler or a DH option. So we'll close the show there. Before we get to that, though, another word from our sponsors. If you are a devoted listener of the show, make sure you consider becoming part of our Locked On Mets Insider program. It's our texting service where you can get some bonus coverage on the New York Mets. Anytime there's a signing that happens, I always send out a subtext first. If I'm working on a story for just baseball about the Mets, or if I'm just working on a podcast and find out something really interesting, I always try to put it there first. And this is where you can ask me questions anytime. I try to respond to all of the texts I get over there. So I appreciate those of you who have already subscribed and those of you who will subscribe. This is also where we're running our giveaways now. So if you want to be part of this bonus coverage on the New York Mets, You can find the link in the episode description to become a Locked On Mets insider, or you can go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Now, if you're trying to just look at this in a vacuum and say the Mets are going to make one more signing this offseason, what's going to impact them the most? In my eyes, it's pretty clear that adding a DH is going to be more impactful than signing a setup man, because a DH is going to get in that box for you 4 times a game. A setup man is going to pitch for you in, if you're lucky, a third of the games throughout the season and give you 1 inning. Yes, that inning is in leverage. It's important. It could be the difference between winning or losing that game. But I think you can manufacture a high leverage reliever a lot easier than you can manufacture a good DH. The Mets have spent the last how many years trying to manufacture that position? The J.D. Davis, Dominic Smith platoon, Daniel Vogelback, Darren Ruff, Daniel Vogelback, Mark Vientos, whatever it is. Platooning at DH has not worked for the Mets. Now, I can hear out the argument of keeping that spot open to give at-bats to the young guys. I'm honestly at a point throughout this offseason with this where one day I wake up and say, yeah, let Mark Vientos cook. Give him the opportunity. I believe in the upside. Go for it. Knowing also the fallback of DJ Stewart, of Starling Marte getting off his feet, I do like the idea of staying internal. And then I think about Jorge Soler in the Mets lineup behind Pete Alonso. I think, oh yeah, that'll actually make them a good team. And they should probably do that. So I really do see the value there. And I think that it should be something the Mets are considering, maybe more so than it appears on the surface. I don't know how much dialogue is going on. I don't know if they're just trying to get someone to fall back at a more reasonable price. If it is a kind of hard line budget of $10 million, they're not signing a DH anyway. So you can just sort of write that off. It's not happening. Justin Turner is going to make more than $10 million. I think he gets paid the least out of that group of Turner, JD Martinez, Jorge Soler, and Rhys Hoskins. And then beyond that, the other options you can sign aren't really much of an upgrade over Mark Vientos and DJ Stewart. Like, yeah, you can get Carlos Santana. I think he's still out there, but I don't know how much better that's going to be. I don't think you want to stunt the growth of some of your young players simply because, you can get a guy. I think you have to get someone who can make a real impact. So if they are constrained budgetarily, I get focusing bullpen. And that probably makes the most sense looking at a long-term view of the Mets. Keeping that spot open, knowing that you have Starling Marte, you want to get off his feet a little bit at a high number and trying to protect that investment, right? If Starling Marte goes out this year and can stay healthy for 135 games and produce, next offseason, you might be able to eat down that contract and move him if you need to clear a spot because your outfield is suddenly crowded because, maybe Drew Gilbert and Jet Williams have made their debuts and they look like starting level players. Maybe one of Jet Williams or Luis Angel Acuña at second base and Jeff McNeil is going to get more run in the outfield. There's a lot of things that can happen long term, and even tying yourself to a DH for multiple years could be questionable. I think a DH has a much bigger impact on this season. And so if you're thinking win now, that's where I think the Mets should be spending whatever remaining resources they have. And if they have to scrap together a bullpen, it seems like they're going to be doing that anyway. And I don't know how much having a Hector Neris in the back of your bullpen is going to change things. I think they are going to need all of these pickups, not all of them, but, of all of these pickups, they're going to need 3 or 4 of them to hit for this bullpen to be successful. And I also think that there is something to be said about their starter depth and how that's going to play in their bullpen. I could see Christian Scott, Mike Vassell, or Dominic Hamill ending up in the pen and giving you 3-inning spurts this year where, you follow up Sean Manaea, who gave you 5 innings, and you go to Mike Vassell for 3. And all of a sudden, there's your bridge right to Edwin Diaz. I can see them getting creative. They still have McGill, Lucchesi, and Budo, who could give you bulk innings. I think you're going to see a lot of that this year. A lot of that mixing and matching and trusting guys to go out and get you through a lineup one time through. Get you 2 innings at least. And if they're on, maybe they retire the side in order 3 times in a row and you're shocked. Like, wow, what an outing by Tyler McGill. Came in and got 7 ground balls and a couple of flyouts. And how about that? All of a sudden, Edwin Diaz has the ball with a lead. That's what's going to make this bullpen good. It's those combination of things. I think as fans, we're waiting for the signings. So we're putting a lot of pressure on who are they going to sign to address this bullpen? Who are they going to sign to be that DH? And look, I've done it. I've been, doing podcasts on this stuff for a month. Really, though, this team's going to sink or swim based on the people that are already on this roster. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I don't think that there's any sign the Mets can make at this point that's going to completely change the fortunes of their season. And if there was a sign like that out there to tie everything back to the initial part of this segment, top arm or top bat, it's getting a DH that could hit you 40 home runs. But when you weigh the long-term implications of signing a Soler, I get the Mets having some pause there and really thinking this thing out. And so we'll just see if we get any splashy news. On this show, until we get some more stuff, because enough happened in the relief market, because I got multiple subtexts, multiple comments on YouTube and Twitter about doing a relief pitcher episode, I wanted to satisfy that need for it today. But I'm going to start kind of changing the gears a little bit on this show and looking ahead more to this season and doing some preview stuff. I'm going to be writing an article where I talk about my top takeaways from the Zips projections on the Mets. I'll explain more of that tomorrow. That'll probably be the show for Wednesday. And then we're going to start, looking at Jeff McNeil's season. What's he going to bring to the table? Can Brandon Nimmo be this guy for 4 more years at least? Can he continue to be a really good starting outfielder that hits you 25 bombs a year? So there's a lot that can be discussed about what's in-house. And I want to aim to do that a little bit more as we start to gear up for spring training, because guess what? We're going to blink and it's going to be here. And the team that is there is the one that we get to cover and watch this season, or the one that I get to cover, I guess, and others get to cover, and we all as fans get to watch. And I think there's still enough here to have a lot of excitement this year. It's just about maybe altering expectations a little bit. So we'll have plenty of time to go through all of it. Appreciate all of you who have tuned in today. Thank you for listening, watching, however you consume the show. If you are on the audio side, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, really appreciate all of you. Hit that subscribe button. Try and make that push to 8,000 subs. I'd love to hit that before opening day. So appreciate all of you who are hitting subscribe. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, you can find that information in the episode description. And as you made it to the end of the show, head over to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. It is the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports with our local experts from each team and our league-wide experts from each league. You can find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.